they won't. They might only need like to get like a good computer with like a couple like of graphic cards, like a specialized graphic cards, and a couple like of Xeon cores.
Right?
It is possible.
But you still need the machine that's going to do the measurement. That's the thing.
Mm,
It's not a
yeah.
simple computer, so I think it's quite costly. But anyways, that's why they say
Okay.
that, psycholinguists still work mostly with observation, but we do have access. There's also something else that psycholinguists use, which is called an eye tracker. So like it's this machine that follows the movement of your pupils. So it tracks your eyes, like for example, and why do we use this? Because we want to see how people read, like so we can see the movements of their eyes, what they're doing when they're reading, right? We also like to see, for
Okay.
example, with second language learners, let's say of Spanish, right? It's very interesting to use eye tracking to look at their perception of agreement, of grammatical agreement. So like for example, if you have a sentence like in Spanish where it's like la casa es, I don't know, es blanca or something like that, right? Yeah. So, like, there have been eye tracking studies done by psycholinguists that look at how second language learners process that through their eyes. So, like, they'll read a sentence like "La casa es blanca," right? And they'll read to the end of the sentence, and their eyes will move naturally from left to right. But then, like for example, if there's, for example, "La casa que está en la esquina es blanca," sometimes we'll find that the second language learners will go back to the beginning of the sentence and try and figure out what agrees with blanca and is that correct, because they have to mark if the sentences are correct or not. And then it'll be like la casa que está en la esquina que antes pertenecía a mis abuelos es blanco, and we'll see like what the learners do with their eyes as they're reading that. Like they see blanco, do they move their eyes back to the beginning of the sentence? Like we can measure those types of things, which is interesting from a perspective of language acquisition. Yeah.
That sounds pretty interesting.
I think it's pretty fascinating. Personally.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Any other, let's go back to what we were talking about yesterday. Any other things that stuck with you? So we had lemmas and lexemes. Remember, lemmas were the abstract form of a word, and the lexeme is the abstract phonological representation. What else?
The production process that we use conceptualization, formulation, and articulation.
Good. The production process, when we're going to speak something, when we're going to say something, whether we have three phases: conceptualization, language or no language in conceptualization. Language or no language? No language, right? We learned that yesterday, right? Formulation, when we get the grammatical form and the phonological encoding, and then articulation, when we actually say the words that we want to say, right? Good. Anything else that you remember?
Speech errors. Speech errors.
Speech errors, we started talking about those. We're going to see those more today, right? That when we study random speech errors of native speakers, we can find out a lot about how the brain actually works with language, right? Good. Anything else?
That sometimes our brain change the arrows. I mean the nouns. We change them. It is an exchangeable arrow as well. We can keep the singular, the plural, but just with different nouns as well. We can keep the same function, but we mix them up.
That's right. That's right. So we can have this type of error. This was one type of speech error that we saw. We're going to see a lot more today, a lot more of the types of errors we make. Okay, good. Anything else that you remember from yesterday?
You mentioned that we have more thoughts than words.
That's right. Do you believe me, Marcelo, or do you disagree?
Well, I was thinking about that, and I think that we should have, the same kind of quantity of thoughts and words, because if we have the thought, it means that we are able to produce those kind of ideas. So
no, sir.
I think
no, sir, because the language of thought is mentalese. We don't have language associated to our thoughts. So, yep. I bet you it's just because maybe you haven't like really analyzed it before, but we have lots more thoughts in our heads than words in our language. Okay, anything else? Was there anything that wasn't clear yesterday? Is there something you want to kind of review that you're a little bit confused about, don't be afraid to ask questions. This is the way that you can challenge me. I like questions.
I do have a question.
Yes,
Well, I don't know. So you said that when you dream, it's something way different than when you're awake. But what happens when these people that start talking like real, but they are sleeping? And sometimes you even you can ask them questions and they reveal information, real information, but they are sleeping. Is that different?
right. I have never studied the subconscious mind. So I can't tell you about what happens when we're sleeping. All I can tell you is about when we're conscious and awake.
All right, thank you.
You might have to investigate that a little bit. That might be something interesting for you to investigate. Yeah, Raul.
Yes, teacher, I have a question. Yesterday you were talking about the dyslexics that is related to the language acquisition. And I don't know how about the different learning styles, like kinesthetic, like students are, I don't know how to say, these are learning.
What about those things? What would you like
I
to
think I think that what happened with the students with brains of students that are not related or interested in language or in music in this kind of style. So how would be the psychology, the psycholinguistic help us to improve their styles of learning?
Yeah, this is something we're actually going to see in the part of language acquisition. We're going to look at learning styles. We're going to look at different psycholinguistic factors that affect our students' success in English, right? Their acquisition. But personally, the more I research, the more I read about these topics, the more I really am convinced that we are all able to acquire a language equally, because we all did it with our first language. All of you are native speakers, right? You're all fluent in Spanish? Yes? Yeah, I'm sure you are. So, but some of you are auditory, some of you are visual, some of you are kinesthetic, some of you have interpersonal intelligence, some of you have musical intelligence, some of you whatever, all this stuff, right? Yet you're all the same in your first language. That didn't affect your first language acquisition. So my personal thought on the matter, the more I read, like I said, is that given the right circumstances, and like if we're provided with good input in the language, we all have the same capability of acquiring the language. But that's something we're going to talk about in language acquisition, okay? Right now, we're just looking at psycholinguistics and how the brain works with language as our first language, okay? But once we get to language acquisition, you'll see what I mean. If any of you saw the talk, did anyone see the talk that Dr. Krashen gave to the Buse by any chance? Do you guys know who Dr. Krashen is? Stephen Krashen? No? Some of you might.
Yeah, today that he was speaking with Noam Chomsky. Do you mean that one? Sure.
Not that one, but that was also interesting. But he also said some of the same things. No, I interviewed Dr. Krashen with the Buse
No, that one.
in January. It's a funny story, actually, and then we'll continue with psycholinguistics. But I wrote to him one day in a moment of complete inspiration, because Dr. Krashen is a rock star. As those of you who know about him, you know that, right? He's a rock star. I mean, he is to language acquisition what Einstein was to physics. I mean, he's the most important name in the history of studies of language acquisition. So one day I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to write to him, because I had seen some of his recent webinars with other people from different places around the world, from Iran, from Egypt, and I thought, why not Ecuador? You know, so I wrote him an email. I found his email address. I wrote him an email, and I put in the subject of the email, from a native Chicagoan linguist on the equator. Because Dr. Krashen is also a native Chicagoan. He's from Chicago originally. And I wrote that in the subject. And I thought, if he's going to read this email, he has to read this email with this subject, right? Not only did he read the email, but he actually agreed to giving us a talk. And so on January 20th of this year, Dr. Krashen gave the Buse a talk. Yeah. I will send you guys the link when we talk about language acquisition so you can see. He gave a talk and then I just basically, you know, asked him some questions that the audience was asking, you know, things like that. But I invited him to our university and he actually gave a talk to us. That was pretty impressive. It was pretty cool. So yeah, Dr. Krashen says that we're all gifted language learners if we are all provided with the right input. And I agree with him. I wholeheartedly agree with him, 100%. Yeah, so as far as learning styles, Raul, to go back to your original question, I don't believe that they have that much of an effect as long as you're provided with good input in the language. Yeah. Okay. Marlon, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Yesterday you were talking about the cycles of planning, and you mentioned macro planning, micro planning, but I don't understand what was, for example, you say macro planning is when you organize the ideas, right?
Okay. Let's imagine, okay, yes, kind of. Let's imagine that somebody, one of your students, for example, wants to ask you, teacher, can I go to the bathroom? Okay, in normal circumstances, of course, right? Okay, so the macro planning is, what do I want to do? What is my intention? I want to ask for permission, right? I want to ask for permission. That's my general intention. That's macro planning. What do I want to accomplish by opening my mouth and saying words? Okay. Micro planning is the little, the small pieces of it, right? The pieces of the planning. Like, okay, so if I want to say, teacher, may I go to the bathroom? I need to address my teacher first, right? And then I need to use may I need to use a modal verb to be polite. I need to use the subject I, and then I need to use a verb, and then I need to use a preposition, a determiner, and a noun. I need to put them all in order. I need to choose the right words to use. That's micro planning. Okay. So you could think of macro as like your intention, your general intention, and micro as the little pieces of what you're going to say.
When you're planning in small details.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyone else? Any questions before we continue?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, Janine, this is off topic, but I found the interview. It is for like an hour and a half.
Yes.
And the dean is there, right? Veronica and
Yes.
also Lucia Serene was there.
Yes.
Well, okay, and I found it. So it's from the official channel, maybe?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's from the Puse channel. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Yes. You heard about Lucia, that she passed away, correct? Miguel?
I was pretty shocked. I don't know what happened. I just heard the news. It was so.
She apparently had a very aggressive form of cancer. Like she had something operated on her hand, and then like it was just, that was it. Like
I thought it was COVID.
No, not that I know. No.
And yeah, and the thing about her husband happened like a year ago, I think, or 2 years ago.
Yeah. Lucia Herrin used to be the director of the English program at the UDLA. That's why we're mentioning her name. Those of you who might have known her from any circumstance. Yes, she used to be our professor here at Católica for the master's program, but she passed away very quickly. Like, and that was like a month before she passed away. Yeah, it was sad. Okay, let's continue, guys. Let's continue. Okay, so if you remember yesterday, we were talking precisely about word errors, okay? And we were talking about how, I'm going to start right here just to refresh your memory. We were talking about how we can tell a lot about how the words are stored in the brain by looking at errors, right? And these are some examples that we looked at yesterday. You guys remember? Right? We saw where things switched places and how we noticed how, you know, something about the function is separate from the word itself, because here we had a switch with they and them, and then we had the plural that stayed in the correct place, just the root word switched. So all of this information was telling us something about how language is organized in our brains. Remember that? Okay. All right, so now we're going to look more specifically at types of word errors. This table is in chapter 3. We're starting chapter 3, okay? This table is at the beginning of chapter 3. It's the exact table that you have in your book, table 3.1. These are types of word errors, okay? So we can take a look at this table. In fact, we can switch to the book and look at the table there because it's a little bit nicer image, okay? This is the book we're working with, right? So if we go down to chapter 3, we can see this same chart. This book, by the way, if you pay attention to the spelling, you'll realize that it was not written by an American author because the person uses British spelling. Yeah, actually the author is from New Zealand. So it's interesting to observe that from a linguistic perspective. Okay, let's see, where is this? I should know where this is. Here we are. Okay, so this is the same chart that I was just showing you. Now, this is important that you guys are able to identify these types of word errors. Okay, this is on page, if you're following along, page 43. You see, page 43 in the Introducing Psycholinguistics book. Okay, right now we're talking about types of word errors. Word errors, okay? Because we're in a little bit, we're going to see types of sound errors because it's possible that our brain can mix up one word or it can mix up one sound, yeah? So right now we're talking about whole words that we say wrong, okay? Remember, these are accidental errors. These are not errors like what we talked about yesterday, dijistes, right? That's not what we're talking about, right? Because that's not random. They do that all the time, okay? All right. So what do we see here? As you guys can observe, we have different main types: misselection, misordering, and other. That's not what I'm interested in. What I'm most interested in is what we see in the middle column. Substitution, blend, anticipation, perseveration, exchange, and omission. And there should be addition down at the bottom, but we'll get there. Okay. So it's really important that you guys understand what's happening with each one of these situations, okay? So first we're going to look at the substitution and blend. So what do we see here? What we see here is the first sentence, the first here, this part, this is what the person wanted to say. Okay, this was what they had in their head that they were going to say. But what they accidentally said is in the second part. Okay, so I'm going to circle the error here in red. Okay, so the person originally wanted to say, close it so it doesn't go stale. Like I'm imagining they're talking about bread. Yeah, like a packet, like a bread, like let's say it's a baguette or something, right? And it's in a bag. And I say, close it so it doesn't go stale, so the bread doesn't go stale, right? But I say, close it so it doesn't go fresh. I mean, stale, right? Okay, this is called the substitution because what happened was the word that I wanted to say, stale, was accidentally replaced by fresh. And I want you to observe something here. What is the relationship between stale and fresh? What is the relationship?
Are they antonyms?
They are antonyms. That's right. They're antonyms. So what does that tell us? Somehow these words must be connected in our brain. Because if I replaced it with the word fresh instead of stale, they're connected to each other somehow. Through what? Through collocations. You guys know collocations as English teachers, words that go together, right? In psycholinguistics, when we look at collocations, we look at words that go together in our brain, that are connected in our brain somehow. And a lot of times we see that substitutions are done by words that are related to each other. So if I say, for example, oh, tomorrow I have to go to the doctor, I mean the dentist. Doctor and dentist are related to each other because they're both medical professionals, right? I could say there's a cat barking, I mean a dog barking. Those are related to each other because they're both pets. They're both domesticated animals, right? So we often find that substitutions are done with words that are related to each other. Okay, yeah. Blend. A blend is when we have two words that come together. Okay, so here we can see the person wanted to say either spank or paddle, and they said spattle accidentally. Yesterday in the video, we saw we heard an example from the professor who was talking, that the person wanted to say wonderful, no, hooray and terrific. And the person accidentally said horrific. Remember? Remember that example? I can give you guys another example in which, like, let's say, hold on. For example, I can't decide if I want to say great or wonderful. And accidentally I say wonderful. Does this ever happen to you? Why does this happen? Because you can think of it as like a race, right? We have a race of the two words in our head, and both of them are racing to get articulated, and accidentally they smash together, they crash into each other, and I end up saying both of them, okay? But this is an accident. This is an error. We're not talking about blends that are actual words that we say. Like, for example, you guys know the blend. You know this word? You know the word brunch?
Yes, breakfast and lunch.
That's breakfast and lunch, right? Thank you, Amelia. But it's not an error. That's not an error. That's a word we use, right? So here we're talking about errors, accidentally saying words, grunderful, that's not a word. That's not what I wanted to say, okay? Yeah. Let's see. Okay. Okay. So far, so good? We understand those errors? Okay. You guys are going to practice with this in groups in a little bit. Okay. So it's important that you guys are clear about these. Sorry, I don't know why that happens. Okay. Anticipation. What happens when you anticipate something? Yes, Raul.
Teacher, I was I had a question with related to the blended error. I don't know if this error is more common when we use tongue twisters, because we tend to mix or to blend the words.
Yeah, the error that's most common when we analyze tongue twisters is not a word error, it's a sound error, because usually we only confuse one sound. And it's a specific type of sound error, which is usually the beginning of words. So we call those spoonerisms, usually when two sounds switch places, but we'll get to that. Okay. Right now we're talking about whole words. When we get to sound errors, we'll talk about tongue twisters and you'll see that. Okay. Yeah. Anticipation is when we say something too early, right? Like in Spanish, you say me anticipé, right? I did something, I got ahead of myself, okay? So look what happens in the example, right? The person wanted to say, I'm not a candidate for a cabinet position, right? So this is the word in question right here. Candidate, I'm not a candidate for the cabinet position. But accidentally, the person says, I'm not a cabinet. We don't know what he said afterwards. That doesn't matter. This, guys, this just means this is a bank of data. It's an abbreviation for a bank of data that these examples come from. They're real examples, okay? Real life. So what happened here? The person was supposed to say, I'm not a candidate for a cabinet position. Yeah. But accidentally, they said the word cabinet too early. I'm not a cabinet. Cabinet was coming. They were going to say it, but they said it too early in the utterance. Okay, so that would be called anticipation. Here's another example. Let me type an example next to this one on the screen. Let's do another example here. Let's say that I want to say, I have to go to the store to buy milk. Okay, I have to go to the store to buy milk, right? And I accidentally say, I have to go to the milk to buy milk, for example. You see, I wanted to say I have to go to the store to buy milk, but what happened? The word milk came too early because I was going to say milk, but it was supposed to come later in the sentence, right? So I accidentally me adelanté al decir milk aquí. You get it? I have to go to the milk to buy, oh, wait, I have to go to the store to buy milk. You see? That's another example, okay? Perseveration, on the other hand, is the opposite. How many pints in a, oh, I'm sorry, guys, I didn't mean to change that color. How many pints in a, here's the error right here. The person said, how many pints in a, and the question should be how many pints in a liter, right? But they accidentally say, how many pints in a liter? You see? So what happened? Perseveration is the opposite. The person already said pints right here, right? And that was fine. How many pints in a, oops. And then they said it again. They started saying it, but they corrected themselves, okay, to say liter. How many pints in a liter? I was gonna say pint again. You see how that works? So this is perseveration because a word appears again later in the sentence. Let me give you another example, okay? If I say, for example, here's another example, okay? Tomorrow my son is going to visit his friend. You see, I ended up saying the word son again. I repeated it again later when it wasn't supposed to be said, okay? Enrique asks why these things happen in the chat. I'm sorry, guys. Enrique asks why these things happen, and it's just simply, we don't know. We don't know exactly. So like, part of it could be, remember the what I gave you guys yesterday, the example of slots and fillers? Do you remember that image I gave you? So like yesterday I said, okay, we have these spaces right here like this, right? And we have, as we're doing our formulation phase, we say, okay, right here, I need a determiner, here I need a noun, here I need a verb, and here I need another noun, let's just say. Okay? The cat ate food, for example, okay? And maybe what happens is that when I'm getting all the items, so I have like, hold on. So I have the words up here. Yeah, I need the word cat. I need the word food. I need the word the somewhere. And I need the verb ate. Yeah. When I start putting those in their spaces down here, sometimes I just mess up. I just don't put them in the right space, right? That's what happens. So I'm supposed to put the here. I'm supposed to put the here, right? And then I'm supposed to put the cat here, and then the ate here, and then the food here. But sometimes food comes too quickly. I say it too early, and it goes here in this noun space. You see? That's why. Sometimes it's because we're tired. Yeah, it happens more often when we're tired. When usually we have worse language production when we're tired. Yeah, okay. That's why those things happen. Yes, Jenny.
Does it happen, or is it related for the gender probably? Because no, yeah.
No, we haven't seen that. We haven't seen that it's related to gender. We have not seen any correlation between errors and gender. Why? What were you going to say?
I was thinking that maybe because women we are multitasking and we are thinking in a lot of things at the same time, or we have a lot of responsibilities, and probably that's why we commit these kind of errors.
I mean, it could be because, yes, because we're thinking about something else at the same time that we're talking about something different, but there's never been any correlation, direct correlation between errors and gender.
Okay, thank you.
Anything. Okay. Exchange. The next one is exchange. So this is when two words swap places. We saw this yesterday. So the sentence should have been just put a piece of cardboard in it. And the person accidentally said, just a put of cardboard in it. Yeah. You see, so put and piece, both of them switched places with each other. Okay, that's called an exchange when we have two words that both switch places. Okay, Yeah. And the last two are quite easy, omission and addition. Omission is when we leave a word out accidentally, right? Accidentally. So here we have, it's an extremely interesting way to look things up. Here, this is the word that they're missing because it says it's an extremely way. Oops, they forgot to say the word interesting. There's nothing here, you see? So this is omission because they left a word out. They omitted a word. It's an extremely way to look. I mean, it's an extremely interesting way to look things up, right? And addition is the opposite, is when we add an extra word. He behaved as like a fool. This as we don't need here, sobra, right? This is addition. An extra word appears. This is the extra word. Okay. Questions? Which one, are there any that you really don't understand? Like, is there one that's just super confusing? Yes, Jefferson.
I have a question about bilinguals.
Uh-huh.
Is it the same when they exchange or swap words in different languages or grammar structures?
So there are a lot of reasons why bilinguals code switch between their languages. It's not always an error. Sometimes it's intentional. Sometimes we have words in the other language that we don't have in one language. Sometimes it's because that's their natural way of speaking. And it, like, if you go to Chicago in some neighborhoods, Spanglish is the language of the neighborhood. So they're constantly switching between both languages, but it's not an error. It's just how they communicate because they can, because they have both languages, right? So not necessarily is my point. Like like them switching into another language is more often than not intentional. And that's how they want it to be. Yeah, it's not about an error. Okay, any others that you have a question about?
Teacher, all these errors, as you said, are not making intentionally. So these errors are not graded in the speaking or writing performance.
We're not talking about students right now, right? We're talking about native speakers. Keep that in mind, right? Keep that in mind. We are not talking about students. We're talking about just normal everyday speakers of a native language, okay? So put this into Spanish. Excuse me for speaking Spanish. No se vayan a ofender if I switch to Spanish sometimes, but it's because I want you to have the perspective from your native language, right? So it's like, for example, if somebody says, for example, mañana tengo que ir a la tienda, digo al médico, a la tienda, digo al médico, ¿por qué dije la tienda? This happens all the time, guys, all the time, right? Or sometimes you don't even notice it. You could say, for example, I don't know, pásame, I don't know, pásame what can it be? Pásame la chompa. ¿No quieres decir la cartera? Sí, la cartera. ¿Qué dije yo? La chompa? No, la cartera, sorry. You see? This type of thing happens all the time. Sometimes we notice what we say wrong, sometimes we don't notice it. So like, for example, as teachers, you might say, okay, let's imagine it's Friday. You could say, okay, entonces mañana en la clase vamos a conversar sobre esto. Teacher, mañana es sábado. Mañana, ¿qué dije yo? Mañana, digo el lunes, right? Something like that. Super normal. Marlon, what would you like to say?
For example, if I said in Spanish, más mejor, is that an example of addition or
no? No, because these are random errors, right? The people who say más mejor usually say más mejor all the time. This is like dijistes. It's a different type of situation. It's a non-standard use of a form, but it's not like accidental. People who say más mejor always say más mejor. That's the cue. That's what the people who say aiga always say aiga. It wasn't an accident. They always say that. The people who say dijistes, trajistes, hablastes, comistes, They always say that. It's not like random errors, okay? It's a different situation. Yeah? James.
Okay, teacher, good afternoon. I have a question about contractions. Is that why contractions were created? Maybe for by native speakers. For example, I'm a bee, a good doctor, a gonna, gotta.
This is because we're lazy, period. It has nothing to do with errors or anything like that. We're just lazy. It's called linguistic economy. We want to do things in the most economical way possible, which means the laziest way possible, right? So instead of saying, I have got to, it's a lot easier to say, I gotta. It's like easier for the muscles in your mouth. And so that's all it is. It has nothing to do with errors.
Thank you.
Yeah. Miguel.
Yeah, in the part that omission, the interesting is like kind of a long word. My question is, can it happen with the longer words, or can it happen with more than one? Can it be 2 or 3 words omitted?
Normally we don't omit 2 or 3 words. Usually no, usually it's only 1 word, but the word can be long or short. It doesn't matter.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions about this? It's going to make more sense as we keep looking at it, okay? As we see some more examples and all that stuff. I don't know. Let's wait a few minutes to do the group activity. Let's take a look at some more examples and then we can do the group activity. So back to the PowerPoint. This is what I just showed you, right? So we can see some more observations about substitutions and blends, for example. We know that substitutions and blends usually involve observe. See, I just said observe instead of involve. That was an accident. They usually involve words that are semantically related. So like I was telling you, right, we had stale and fresh, which are antonyms. We can have synonyms, great and terrific, parts of a whole. Maybe I could say, oh my gosh, over there, that branch is broken. And I could say, oh my gosh, the tree is broken. I mean, the branch is broken. Yeah, because it's parts of a whole, things like that, okay? We can have, for example, must you leave? It's still so late, when the person wanted to say early. Here we have antonyms, right? Do you have to go? It's still so late. I mean, early. It's not late, it's early. You see? And again, we've seen blends where we have synonyms. A lot of times the blends are synonyms. Slick and slippery, those are synonyms. And the person accidentally says slicker. Yeah. Stomach and tummy, those are synonyms. Tummy is what we use for little kids. When we say, does your tummy hurt? Right? Your stomach. So the person accidentally says stomach. Like if I'm talking to my son and I can't decide if I'm going to say stomach or tummy, and I move my mouth and both of them come out. Yeah.
Teacher, I have a question.
Yes.
I don't see any mistake where you switch syllables in the same word, but I've heard that, and I think I've done that sometimes.
Can you think of an example?
Yeah, for example, it happened to me. I wanted to say bufanda, but I said fubanda. Is that dyslexia?
No.
Sorry.
No. No, dyslexia is about reading. It's a reading disorder, so it's not dyslexia. But what sometimes happened is something called metathesis. Metathesis is when we accidentally like sometimes switch syllables. We move syllables like that. But a lot of times this is something also that people do on a regular basis, right? So for example, somebody said, instead of saying estómago, they could say estógamo, for example. Have you heard that before, maybe?
So you're saying that's not a mistake?
It is a mistake.
Oh, but it's not from these categories.
No, not these categories. I think because here we're talking about entire words. Yeah, we're not talking about syllables of words. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we know that concept level relationships involve pre-linguistic and abstract ideas, which is probably why we actually have a lot of these words connected in our minds. Because when we activate certain concepts, we activate synonyms, we activate their antonyms. Words are related in our minds, right? Concepts are related in our minds. Yeah. And when we look at the lemma level, which is the formulation phase, right? Lemma level relationships tend to be associative. And this is when we can talk about collocations that I was mentioning to you guys, right? Associated words are hardly ever involved in blends, but they are in substitutions like antonyms or words that are parts of a whole. Okay, let's take a look. Let me just check what's on the next slide before we continue. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's do this one slide and then we'll take a look at the book, okay? So, a word that is produced is similar to an intended word in a sound and shape, but not necessarily in meaning. We call these malapropisms, okay? So these are those words that it's like a substitution. It's a special type of substitution. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have highlighted this one. This one is wrong. Let me get out of here for a moment. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Hold on one second. I just have to change the color of this or you'll get confused. Okay, this one. Yeah. All right, let's take a look at it again. Okay, so here are some examples of malapropisms, right? These are words that are not necessarily related in meaning, but they are in sound. So let's look at 317. The person wanted to say, if these two vectors are equivalent, then, and the person accidentally said, if these two vectors are equivocal, then, you see, equivalent and equivocal don't mean the same thing, but what? They look similar and they sound similar. Equivalent, equivocal, right? These are called malapropisms. So these substitutions are based on phonological features of the word and not semantic features. Look at 318. He is the very pinnacle of politeness. He's like the poster child, the representation, the perfect example of politeness, right? That's what it means, pinnacle. And the person accidentally said he is the very pineapple of politeness. Pinnacle and pineapple have nothing to do with each other in meaning, but phonologically, they're very similar. Pinnacle, pineapple. You see how they sound similar? Yeah. Here's another example. The law I signed today directs new funds to the task of collecting vital intelligence on weapons of mass production. Production and destruction also sound very similar. Yeah, we could argue that there's also a semantic relationship, that they're antonyms, yes, but they classify this under a malapropism. So malapropisms are substitutions, like we saw before, right? Substitutions of a special type because they're phonologically related words. Okay, they're phonologically related words. Okay, so let's take a look at this part of the book. Yeah. So here we are in chapter 3 right now, remember. So they give you some more examples, substitutions and blends, how we go about finding words. Remember, you don't have to know all of the details because some of this is really complex. Yeah, I just want you to get the general idea. There's some more examples there you guys can take a look at now. We're going to do a quick experiment. Everybody ready? I'm going to experiment on you. Okay. Okay, before we look at this, okay, I don't want to show you the examples in the book yet. I want you guys to do it without the influence of the book. Let me stop sharing this for a moment. Okay, you ready? Everybody ready? What I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to tell you 5 words. I'm going to tell you 5 words. This is not a dictado, okay? You're not going to write the words in the chat. No. What I want you to do is think of the first word that comes to mind when I say each of these words, okay? Think of the first word that comes to mind when I say each of these words. We're gonna do this in Spanish, in your native language, okay? So I want you to answer me in Spanish as well. I'm not looking for a creative answer. That's not the point of this experiment. I don't want creative answers. I don't want funny answers. I just want literally the first word that comes to your mind. Okay, so let's just give you an example. Let's imagine that I say, for example, cake. The first word that I think of when I hear cake is birthday. Yeah, and so you guys are going to write whatever word you first think of. Okay, everybody please write it in the chat. Don't copy off each other. You don't need to. Just write what you first think of. Everybody clear on that? Okay. Vamos a cambiar el chip al español un ratito. Ya. Ok. Primera palabra. ¿Listos? A ver, pongan todos uno punto. Ya, listos para escribir la palabra. Ok, primera palabra. Papel. Rapidito, rapidito, papel. Ya. Segunda palabra. Comida. Rapidito igual. The faster you can, the better. Okay. Tercera palabra. Inglés. Okay. ¿Ya? Cuarta palabra, fiesta. Y la quinta, Ecuador. Pobre selección. I just saw somebody write la selección. I'm like, pobre Tri. Maybe we shouldn't talk about that. Okay, so let's take a look. Let's take a look at some of the words you and your classmates wrote. Okay, so the first word that I said was papel. If you guys go back up in the chat and look at the things your classmates wrote, we have blanco, lápiz. We have two people, lápiz, hoja, lápiz, cuaderno, cuaderno, hoja, hoja, lápiz, examen, libro, test, etc. Blanco. So we see some words that are repeated. For example, blanco, hoja, lápiz, cuaderno. This is what we expect. This is how this experiment works. That's fine. So far, you've passed. The second word that I said was comida. So we have rico, carne, comer, cola, cuchara, hambre, pizza, mariscos, hamburguesa, pizza, golosos. Yeah, okay. Hambre, hambre. Wow, nobody said arroz. There's always somebody who says arroz when I ask this type of a question. And nobody said arroz. Okay, number 3. I said inglés, right? So I see a lot of idioma, lengua, idioma, idioma, lenguaje, lenguaje. Isn't there a difference between lenguaje and idioma? I think so. Estudio, enseñar, okay, etc. Yeah. Fiesta for number 4. We see a lot of divertido, diversión, right? Globos, Basile. Thank you, Daniel. That's interesting. Alcohol, serpentina, diversión, cerveza, diversión, baile, baile, baile. Okay. Ecuador, a lot of you said país. Amarillo, bandera, país. Amarillo, amarillo, azul y rojo. I said one word, Raúl, not 3, 4. Okay. What is my point here? Okay, why did we do this experiment? Because we want to see how words are associated in our brains. And by you responding with the first word that you think of when you hear that word that I told you, that's indicative of what's going on in your brain, of what you guys think of first, like of how the words are connected in your brain. So if Ecuador, if you want to say the word Ecuador, you also have connected to that word país. You guys can think of this as, you can imagine like we're in the park, let's say El Parque Elegido, La Carolina or something, and let's imagine that there's a clown and he has a bunch of balloons, right? A lot of balloons on strings, okay? And for every child who he sees, he gives them a balloon. Are you following me? This is an analogy, okay. What happens if the clown has a lot of balloons and he pulls one string, right? What happens with the rest of the balloons? When the clown goes to take one balloon out to give to a child, what happens to the rest of the balloons?
They remain together.
They remain together, but sometimes a couple of them are connected, right? So when he pulls one string, sometimes 2 or 3 or 4 balloons come with it. You see what I mean? This is kind of an image that you can have of when we're trying to retrieve words from our brain. When we're trying to retrieve a word, sometimes we have a few other words that come with that word. And if we can't untangle the words before we actually say them, then we end up committing errors. Yeah. You see, if we can't free the word and get it by itself, then we can end up committing errors. And those words that are attached to the word that we want to say are collocations. They're related to that word. Let's do one more. I'm curious on this one. I have to ask this one because I'm going to show you the results in the book, and I bet you they're going to be a lot different from what you guys say. A ver, uno más, ¿sí? Unito más. No sean malitos. One more. Let's do one more, okay? In the chat, can you please tell me the first word? A ver, la primera palabra en la que piensan al decir yo la palabra pan. Pan. Let's take a look. Sándwich, desayuno, rico, jugo, café, comida, rico, desayuno, suave, harina, rico, comida, café. You guys are pretty much all the same, right? Rico, comida, café, desayuno are the main ones, which is fine. That's how it's supposed to be. Those are strongly related in your brains. Guess what? None of you said the number one word that the people in the experiments in the book said when they heard the word bread. So what does this tell us? That collocations have a very strong cultural component. I would not say comida. I would not say food, breakfast, none of that stuff. You know what I would say when I hear the word bread? The first thing that I think of as a native English speaker is butter. None of you said butter. Because most of you are not used to eating bread and butter at a restaurant before you have your food, right?
You like you used to eat like that.
But it's a very big cultural component for us. So let's take a look at what in the book, at the examples that they give. They have some data here. Okay, so they did these target words as similar to what we just did. Okay, high, white, long, husband, blah, blah, blah. So they would say this word, right? And then the response and the number after it, as you can see, is the percentages, what percentage of the respondents said these words, okay? So as you can observe here in this chart, when the person said husband, 85% of the respondents said wife. That's a lot. That means that these two words are strongly related to each other in our brains. They are really connected to each other. Okay. Here we have less, long, short, right? 53%. Maybe somebody said long hair, long, whatever, who knows what else, right? But this one is very strong. Here's another one that's very strong. Boy, 78% said girl. Yeah. Okay. That's kind of interesting because we can see how strong the relationships are between these words in our brains. Okay. What I want to show you is this part here. So when they said the target word, when they said butter, you can see what percentage of people responded with each one of the words that we have here, right? So look, when they said butter, 25% of the people responded with bread. That was the most popular answer, but we also have other answers, right? Yellow, margarine, cheese, milk, cup, eggs, blah, 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 blah. Okay. But look at this. It's not the same al revés. So when the person says, okay, butter, 25% said bread. When the person says bread, 54% responded with butter. Isn't that interesting? So butter had only 25% bread, but then bread had 54% butter. Why is this? Because sometimes collocations are directional. In English, we say bread and butter all the time. We never say butter and bread. We say bread and butter. We even have pickles that are bread and butter pickles. They're like sweet. I don't like them. But anyways, they're thick and they're sweet. Yeah, bread and butter pickles. It's always bread and butter. We don't say butter and bread. So I have the intuition that if bread is said first, butter is a natural response. But if butter is said first, bread is not a natural response. You see? Interesting, huh? Yeah, so you could see all of the, and the higher the number, the stronger the relationship, the stronger the connection between those two words. The lower the number, the more less likely there's a connection, right? Look at, for example, somebody says bread, and then there's a person down here who said wine, for example, only two people. Or bread, and if somebody says bacon, maybe you guys wouldn't think of bacon. Yeah, that's kind of strange. Or somebody says butter, and somebody else responds scotch, butterscotch, the flavor, I guess, right? Butter, sickness, sickness related to butter. Maybe that's someone's personal experience, right? So these are collocations from a psycholinguistic perspective. They're also called association norms. See? Okay. All right. I hope you understood that experiment, because you guys are going to do something very similar as one of your experiments. Okay, as one of your homework assignments. I'm going to tell you about your homework assignments tomorrow, more specifically, and you'll have them on the platform and all that, okay? But that's going to be one of the experiments you're going to conduct with some people to see what they respond, okay? Okay, I'm going to start you guys off for 15 minutes before the break. I'll let you start off working on this activity. I think 15 minutes will be enough. When you guys finish doing the activity in your groups, you can take your break until 6:40, and then we'll go over the activity as a class at 6:40, okay? I don't think it will take you longer than 15 minutes to complete. Let me show you what the activity is. It's in the book, so everybody can open your PDF and go to page, this is page 51. Everybody go to page 51, please. Or you can take a screenshot of this. That's fine too, okay? I'm going to separate you into breakout rooms randomly. And what you guys have to determine is what we have just looked at. What type of word level error has taken place in each of the following examples? So the first, before the X, right, before this, before the symbol there, the first sentence or utterance is what the person wanted to say. So the person wanted to say to determine what or which, right? And accidentally the person said to determine watch. This is the error right here, okay? We could see the error, yeah? What kind of error is this? We have to determine. Now, remember something. You are looking at written language, but these were spoken language errors. So don't look at the spelling. Listen to the sounds. The person wanted to say to determine what or to determine which, and they said to determine watch. Okay, so talk with your groups, identify the error first. Where is it? What did they say wrong? Right? And then try to determine what type of error it is according to the chart that we just saw. Cool? Everyone understand what they have to do? Okay. So then I'm going to separate you into breakout rooms. Let me make sure that I allow you to share your screens before you leave, because
Teacher, is it necessary to explain why, or just sign what it's error?
just to identify what type of error it is, that's all. A blend, a substitution, anticipation, perseveration, those things, okay? Okay. Let me create your breakout rooms. You don't need to turn in anything to me, okay? You don't need to give anything to me, so you can just write it down for yourself in your notebook. It's fine, okay? You don't need to give anything to me, okay? I'm just going to randomly create the breakout rooms, and you guys can go ahead to the breakout room. So remember, at 6:20, you should be finished. I'll visit you, okay? And then you take your break till 6:40. Okay, guys, go ahead.
contexto y vamos identificando.
Ya vi, ya.
Yeah.
Sí, ya. Comparte más si es que quieres.
Exchange 2 words.
No, I don't think it is not exchange because
Esa de anticipación.
Sí. Sí puede ser anticipación.
O puede ser exchange, 2 words, swap places.
I guess it's exchange. Sí, puede ser exchange.
Porque la primera dice just pizza put up cargo in it. O sea, cambia.
And neither learns. Entonces creo que sí.
Creo que es exchange.
La verdad, el orden.
Yo también creo que es de exchange. Ay, perdón. Sí, exchange.
Exchange.
No, lo
Porque
que pasa
cuando tú le cambias, tú modificas cada palabra. En
Ajá.
este caso, exacto, lo que decías, Lilma. Entonces, como le modificas, le estás intercambiando el puesto, pero si tú le pones como anticipation, entonces deberías de decir la misma palabra como está escrita antes.
Sí, y a mí no, o sea, considero que no es porque aquí, como dice en el primero, le sustituye, ahí en el ejemplo dice closed y doesn't go still, pero dice, en vez de still, dice fresh. Y aquí tiene relación el roof con el...
Okay, so
That
number
one's French.
Yeah, I have no idea. Gosh, to the good. I have no idea how to pronounce that. Okay, we're gonna meet number 7, I'm guessing, unless someone here speaks French.
You have the
But I
English
think it,
translation.
yeah, the translation's right under.
You have gym every day except Tuesday when you go to the gym, to the pool. So, wait a second, that is repeating.
What happened?
Yes.
Words, so that is
I think it's substitution.
yes, substitution. Yeah, I think so.
I'm going to write
There.
that.
Number 2, substitution.
Let me do substitution. Yeah. Number 3, let me do right. A language learner needs. A language neither learns. Those.
They are blent.
Learner needs neither. Yes. I think it's blend.
This is blend.
Yes.
But at the end is learns. Why this repeating the learner? ¿Puede ser 2 errores al mismo?
Number 4 or number 3?
Number 3, the neither is a blend error and learns is a substitution.
Substitution, let me to check.
Yes, blend and substitution. Blend in neither and learns is a substitution. I don't know.
I think that this is blend because it's changing. Learner neither needs learns. I think that both of them are blend.
I'm going to check this later.
Needs learns. Yeah, I got your idea that needs and learns, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
Are blend.
Continue with the next. Number 4.
Number 4.
Chamber music, chamber mate. Music.
Chamber music, chamber
mate.
It's a substitution.
Music and made. Chamber music, chamber made. Let me to check. Substitution is a meaning.
They are related.
They are related.
Music and made.
Okay,
Music made. But also about the sound. So it's a substitution, but it is malapropism.
No, it's not malapropism.
I think the sound.
Look at this.
Hi, teacher. How are you?
Substitution. Yes, this one. Hello, Jenny.
How are we doing?
Good.
I think we're done. I think we have finished this. We are just rethinking number 4.
Rethinking number 4. Okay.
Yes.
Because it's the chamber music, chamber made, one word. And it is, we are thinking like it's going to be a substitution because it's one word replaces another. In this case, music.
And this is related to
replaced
the
by made.
opera. Yes. And this is related to the opera.
And
so
what
like the balloons.
And what did you say for number 3?
Number 3.
Exchange. Good. And what did you say for number 7?
Perseveration.
Good job. Yeah, good. I think you guys must have them. Good job.
Yes, we have. Thank you. Thank you, Jenny.
Okay. You guys can take a break if you want now then until 6:40. Okay?
Okay, good.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
It is 6:45 or 6:40, sorry, I didn't.
6:40 because it starts at
6:40, okay.
6:40.
All right, okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Denise.
Hello. Did you guys finish?
We think so.
Gentlemen? It's not often we have a group of all men.
Oh, yeah.
Normally there's a lot of women in English teaching. Good. Okay, you guys can take your break. Go ahead until 6:40.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead. Hi, did you guys finish?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, you can go ahead and take your break and we'll review them at 6:40, okay?
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Perseveration.
Sí, porque le repites otra vez.
Es perseveration, ajá.
The 5 que era one is being several at dinner.
Exchange.
It is exchange. 5.
Yeah.
5 exchange, 6 anticipation y 7 perseveration.
Exercise 3, 2.2.
Check.
Yeah, good job.
Al break.
You can go on your break until 6:40, okay? Go ahead and take a break until 6:40.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Did you finish? Hello? Yeah, go ahead and
Yeah,
take a break until 6:40 and we will review it, okay? At 6:40.
okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you in 10 minutes.
A ver, you have the gym every day except Tuesday when you
It's
go
not
to-
perseveration, it is.
Let me to check gym. Gym.
Yeah, it's perseveration. A word appears again later in the sentence. At the
Gym.
beginning, the sentence, at the beginning, we have gym, and then we repeat. Gym is repeated, so it's perseveration.
Let me just.
Evelyn is right, yes.
Okay.
Okay, it's perseveration.
I need more time to think about that part.
That's right, though. You're right. Go ahead and take a break, guys, until 6:40.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, teacher.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see how you guys did. Why is it so dark in here? Oh, that's why. Hold on one second. Let me turn on the other light. Okay, that's better. All right, let's see how you guys did. Okay, so let's take a look at the activity. Okay, so the first one, we already identified the error, right? It was the person wanted to say what or which, and the error that they actually ended up producing was this one right here. So why don't you guys answer in the chat? I think I get a better idea that way of how everyone is doing. So go ahead and answer in the chat for number one. What type of error is this? Go ahead and answer in the chat. Let's see what everybody says. Okay, most of you are correct. Yeah. Okay, so what happened here? Remember, we're looking at this from the perspective of, we're looking at this from the perspective of speaking. So the person wanted to say, like, let's say, for example, to determine what strategy to use, or to determine which strategy to use. Either one is fine, right? But the person said to determine what watch strategy to use. Watch, no. This would be considered a blend. That's correct. It's a blend because we have part of the word what and we have part of the word which. Blend. See what I just did? Blend. Blend. Okay. That would be the answer to the first one. Process the answers, and at the end, if you guys don't understand why one is the way it is, then let's talk about it, okay? All right, so for number two, the person wanted a branch falling on the roof, and the person accidentally said a branch falling on the tree. So this was the error. This is the wrong word that they used, right? They wanted to say roof. What kind of error is this? Go ahead and write it in the chat again, please. What type of error is this, please? Smart group. Yeah. Okay, you guys are all saying substitution. That's correct. That's substitution because we took one word and we replaced it with another word. So this would be an example of the error of substitution. That's correct. We'll write it right there. Let's observe something. Where did this come from? Right? Where did this come from? Well, look, we have a branch falling on the roof, and they said a branch falling on the tree. Why did they say tree instead of roof? Why do you think?
Maybe because,
Go ahead, Jane.
sorry. I have associated because most of the houses in United States are close with trees. That's why I have associated.
Okay.
With trees.
May I say something? Sure. I think that it's associated with the word branch. It's associated branch and tree.
Right. So when the person said branch, it's like in their head that all of the words that are related to branch are activated. And so instead of taking roof from their mental dictionary, they took the word tree that was associated to branch, right? And they substituted it. So I think that's a good answer, Dorleni. Yes, probably from branch. Yes. Okay, for number three, a language learner needs and a language needer learns. This one was a little hard for some of you. So what did you say? Go ahead and put it in the chat, please. Let's see. Let's see what happened with this one. Okay. Yeah, most of you put exchange. That's correct. Some of you are like, well, no, this is a blend because we have neither. Yeah. What did we talk about yesterday? You guys remember? How we talked about the morphemes that are separate from the words, right? So we have this ER right here and this S, right? So we have the morpheme. This is called a derivational morpheme, ER. It makes it a person, right? And then the S is an inflectional morpheme from a verb conjugation, right? And what happened in the error? The ER and the S were placed correctly. What changed, what was exchanged, is the root word, learn and need, right? They said need and learn. But the morphemes that were attached to the words actually were in the correct place. This is an exchange, and what does this indicate to us? This indicates that the morphemes and the root words are stored separately in our brains because we got the morphemes right, but we didn't get the root words right. Okay, that's what it suggests. Good. Number 4. The person wanted to say chamber music and they accidentally said chambermaid. And here's the error, right? That's what they said wrong. And what kind of error is this? Let's see what you guys say in the chat. Good. Substitution. That's right. Substitution. We can ask ourselves why. Why did they say chambermaid instead of chamber music? Maybe because chambermaid might be a little bit more common than chamber music. You guys know what these are. Chamber music is the type of music that is played in church with like an organ. It's that holy, really filling sounding music from church. Yeah. This is called chamber music. And a chambermaid is like Jennifer Lopez from Made in Manhattan. You remember that movie? Or are you guys too young? Yeah, where she's dressed in like that black outfit with a white apron and things like that. Yeah, that's a chambermaid. Substitution is what happened here. Yeah, maybe because both of the words start with the M sound also, so it's more likely for that to happen. I don't know. Okay, the person wanted to say in number 5, wine is being served at dinner, and they accidentally said dinner is being served at wine. What do we call this? Exchange, good. In order for it to be an exchange, remember that we need to have 2 things that switch places, 2 words, right? And here we have dinner and wine, and they switch places with each other. So that's an exchange. Good job. Okay. Yeah. Number 6, many players think, and then the person says, no, many people think he's the most underrated player in the nation. So here's the error, right? They started saying many players think, many people think he's the most underrated player in the nation. What is this error? Yes, good job, guys. You're really good at this. Anticipation, because they said the word too early. They said players too early, but players was coming. They just said it too early, right? So we would call this anticipation, yeah? Does anyone speak French for number 7 and you want to show off your skills? Anyway, you have the English translation right beneath it, right? Yeah. So in French, they say ta gym tous les jours, sauf le mardi où tu vas à la gym, à la piscine. Okay. So they said the wrong word. This was the wrong word. It's in English right there, right? I want to draw your attention to something. You have gym every day except Tuesday when you go to the gym. To the pool. What kind of error is this? Wow, you guys are nailing this. I'm impressed. I'm totally impressed. Yes, this is called perseveration. Because it was said again. They already said gym, right? And then they accidentally said it again and they wanted to say to the pool. Okay, any questions on this? Okay. So let me erase all this. So we study all of these things because it tells us something about how words are stored in our brain. Okay. When we study what happens when the system breaks down, we can understand a lot about how the system actually works. Okay. Yeah. All right, let's switch back to this PowerPoint. Okay. Okay. Remember, okay, now we're starting with chapter 4, right? We're starting with chapter 4. Remember that we mentioned just now, actually, we saw the example with a language learner needs and a language needer learns, right? And these are morphological errors because we see morphemes being switched, right? Morphemes. Morphemes are the smallest portion of a word with meaning, right? So a morpheme could be ing, a morpheme could be er, a morpheme can be the root word. Those are all morphemes, okay? And so what do we notice? If you look at all of these examples, guys, we see the same thing. He works for a company that makes kitchens. He works for a kitchen, singular, that makes companies. You see here, what they wanted to see was in singular, but then they had plural here. It just started to sound, it just sounded to start. The ED is in the right place, right? Here again, we have the ED. I thought the truck was parked. I thought the park was trucked. This is in the right place. The root word switched. She's already packed 2 trunks, and she's already trunked 2 packs. This is, all of these morphemes are in the correct place where the speaker intended, okay? All they did was switch the root words, yeah? And again, wearing a name tag and naming a where tag is the same thing. So what do we see once again? We see that in our brains, we do not have the word trucked or parked or started as complete words stored in our brains, but rather we have them stored as separate entities. So we have the word start stored in our brain, and then we also have this ED stored somewhere in our brain. And we have sound stored in our brain, and we have that ED over there. You see? So these are all stored separately because we can see this evidence from errors. If they got the morpheme right, the end morpheme, the ED, the S, all that stuff, that was in the right place, but the root word was wrong, then it tells us that those morphemes and their root words are stored separately in the brain because we can get one part right and the other part wrong. You see what I mean? Okay. So that's just some more examples. Okay, here comes the fun part. Okay, in this chapter, which by the way is called, I'm sorry, I didn't tell you, I think it's called Building Words. Yes, Building Words. In this chapter, they talk about tip of the tongue. How many of you have experienced this before, tip of the tongue?
It's awful.
It's horrible, right? It's horrible. We suffer a lot from it. It's like right there, that word. We know the word. We know the word. It's there. It's in our brains. It's not that we don't know it. It's just that we can't retrieve it. We cannot retrieve it. So we're about to learn what happens. We're about to see why that happens to us, what's happening in our brain. Okay, so now you're going to understand why you guys experience this. Okay, so tip of the tongue, otherwise known as TOT, can be defined as a gap that is intensely active. In other words, I know that I have that word in my brain. It's there. I can taste it. I just can't retrieve all of it. Sometimes, you know, it begins with an S, like say, oh, what is that word? Like it begins with an S, like, is it like, no, right? How many of you have lived this before? Like, for example, when you say, what is that instrument that we use to see planets and stuff? What is it called? I think it begins with a T. It's like tele, and then somebody can say telescope. Yes, telescope. Thank you. Right? Yeah. Okay. Some people suffer from a linguistic disorder, which is anomia. This is a psycholinguistic disorder, which is a very severe and chronic case of tip of the tongue. They can't remember a lot of words for for almost everything, constantly every single day. Okay, this is not normal. Anomia is not normal. It's a disorder, right? But there are some people who do suffer from anomia, and those are the people that have this chronic case of tip of the tongue. Several times a day, they cannot retrieve words. Okay. So we're going to take a look at two videos right now. One is going to be the continuation of the video that we were watching yesterday, and we're going to see some of the experiments that the presenter does to elicit tip of the tongue, because you can study this as an experiment. And we're also going to see what happens in our brains when we have tip of the tongue, okay? So let me share my screen with you in the video section. We'll take a look first at Dr. Karen Humphreys. This is actually where we left off yesterday. So let's take a look, right?
Think of a word, you almost have it there, you know that you have it, you just can't quite get it out. It happens with names a lot of the time, and sometimes you know a few of the sounds of it. So you might know, like, oh, it's a V name, it's like Vanessa, Victoria. You might know how many syllables it has or something. Sometimes you can think of a similar word, but often you know it's the wrong one. If someone tells you, you know, is it this? No, that's not, it's just not coming to me, right? Another one that happens all the time, children throughout the ages have been mortally aggrieved by being called by their sibling's name, or, you know, worse, the dog's name. Then you can become a parent and realize you're doing the same thing to your children as well. We make morpheme errors, so these are parts of the words that are meaningful. So this was me. I was trying to say this bar is overrun by undergrads, but it came out this bar is underrun by overgrads.
Okay, she goes a little out of order for a little bit, but it's okay. We'll listen to her because we're going to see all these things. So we'll listen to her and then we'll see the experiment she does for tip of the tongue, okay? She'll go back to it.
This is another one. This is me as well. This great product on TV. I was seeing a calcium rust and lime dissolver, but I kept talking about a calcium lust and rhyme dissolver. Right, so clearly these sounds, these phonemes have picked up and swapped places. And of course, you know, you all being good McMaster people would be familiar with the classic. Right, so these last ones especially are probably the most well-known. They're sometimes known as Spoonerisms, so named after the Reverend William Spooner, who was the Dean and Warden of New College at Oxford. And he was infamous for making these kinds of slips, and things were trying to, you know, raise a toast to the dear old Queen, but instead raised a toast to the queer old Dean. And there's a ton of them that are attributed to him. The sad truth of the story is he probably made most of them up, and the ones that he didn't make up, his students made up and attributed to him as well. But we still do refer to them as Spoonerisms pretty often. So what's causing these? So one really popular idea had been that of Freud, right? That these are also referred to as Freudian slips sometimes. And so he was arguing that it's these suppressed or repressed thoughts and desires that inadvertently come out in the slips, right? And they're letting your innermost thoughts out, even the ones that you don't acknowledge to yourself. Right? And this idea has been really popular. And if I give you, you know, examples like the lust dissolver and, you know, the mother yelling out horrific to her daughter, you can kind of see where he's going with this, right? But there's a huge problem with the selectivity that he was doing coming up with these theories, right? It makes a lot of sense. You know, the ones that you report and you talk about are obviously the ones that are funny or naughty, and you don't have a very good sense of, you know, what are the ones that people actually do make? How are these things actually formed? So even from a psycholinguistic viewpoint, there's a problem when we look at these errors that are out in the wild, right? The ones that you report on, you can go and analyze them, but people tend to report on the ones that are amusing in some way. So we don't know what's, you know, the real scope of what's going on there. Right. However, when we analyze the kinds of errors that we do make, Freud was certainly right about one thing. That speech errors don't happen randomly, right? Even though they're this erroneous behavior, they have all of these regularities. Right? So one thing we know is that word errors tend to obey word rules. They care about things like nouns swap with nouns and verbs swap with verbs. The outcomes tend to be grammatically legal, even if they don't make sense. Sound errors tend to obey sound rules. So the beginnings of words exchange with the beginnings of words. The outcomes tend to be phonologically legal. And so one thing we see is that words split apart at really predictable places. And when you can see where it splits apart when it goes wrong, that's telling us that these are some of the building blocks of language, right, that we're using to build it up. And whether it's you're building sentences out of words or if you're building words out of sounds. So these errors have been a really useful way to start the scientific study of how we produce language. And the errors reveal things like the building blocks of language. And they also talk about the rules that we use to put these together. These give us an insight into what's normally a really seamless process. And by seeing where the system breaks down, we can start to figure out how it was built together in the first place. So like I said, there's a bit of a problem in just looking at the errors that people tell you about or people tell you that their professors said and they email me. They do email me. If you care to email me with good ones you have, I would be delighted to hear them. From like, you can email me in 5 years' time. Here's one that I came across. I'll be really, truly delighted. So that it can be a lot better to start looking at errors in the lab. Right? And this way we don't have selectivity problems. Right? This way we're able to actually elicit errors, get people into the lab and get them to make errors on the spot. And we can do this under controlled conditions where we can record them and listen back to them and really figure out what's going wrong. And luckily, we figured out a bunch of ways of doing that. And we have a whole bunch of techniques that we can use to elicit grammatical errors, or word errors, or morpheme errors, or phonological errors. And today, I'm going to especially talk about two types of these, the tip of the tongue errors and also the spoonerism type phonological errors. So how do we get people to make errors, right? Well, there are some really time-honored ways. We can do tongue twisters, right? The child's game,
Okay, we're gonna look at tongue twisters in a little bit, maybe tomorrow actually, but I wanna, skip to this part right now. Let's make sure, there we go. Now she's gonna talk about how they elicit tip of the tongue states in a laboratory. How do we get people to be in this state, okay?
So that's some of the techniques we have to do these phonological errors. I also like to torture people by eliciting tip of the tongue states from them. Remember that these are the times when you can't quite remember the word, that you know it, but you don't quite have it there. You'll know it if you hear it, but it's just kind of agonizingly out of reach. Right? So what we do is we present people with definitions of fairly rare words, and get them to report whether they know it, they don't know it, or they're in a tip of the tongue state. Right, so try these. What's the name? Don't yell it out if you know it. What's the name of the shiny, usually black volcanic glass formed by the rapid cooling of lava?
Okay, does anyone know this question? This is a little bit of trivia.
Obsidiana, I think, or well, in Spanish.
Wow. I'm impressed, yes. Okay. Some of you might have that information in your head and you're like, I know the word begins with O. Right? So she asks these types of trivia questions so that people can like say, oh, I know that word. I mean, it's a different story if you don't know the name of this. If you don't know this piece of trivia, then you're not going to experience tip of the tongue. But if you know this, and you just can't retrieve the word, then you're experiencing tip of the tongue, okay?
The answer is obsidian, okay? What do you call people who explore caves?
Do you have a name for this in Spanish? No. Does anyone know it in English?
In Spanish, maybe mineros.
But miners don't explore caves. They have to retrieve things from caves, right? We have a word for people that explore caves in English. Yeah, so many people might say, oh, I know that word. It begins with a sp. It's like yeah. It's a fun word in English. She pronounces it a little differently than I do because she's from New Zealand, I believe. But I say spelunkers. Spelunkers is how we call people who explore caves.
Spelunkers, right? Okay. What's the name for the body's principal air passage, the medical name for windpipe? Ah, you have to be quiet and let other people stew in their agony. Okay. Oops, oh, I gave you away the answer. Shamrock. It was just in Patrick's Day. You probably were all primed up on that one. Okay. What do you call it when a legislator gives long speeches in an effort to delay or obstruct legislation that he or she opposes? I see there's a few people in the characteristic pose of the tip of the tongue state. Ready? Filibuster. Okay. Right. One more for you. What's the name of the sacred dung beetle of ancient Egypt? Scarab, exactly. Okay. So did anybody get into any tip of the tongue states on those ones? A few of them. So we certainly can't get you to do it every single time. We've got to give you these pretty rare words that some of the time you're going to know it, some of the time you're going to just, I have no idea what that word is, right? And every now and then we hit the sweet spot and people get in and report a tip of the tongue state. Okay, and so if you were in a tip of the tongue state, did anyone have the experience where like you knew a few of the sounds, like you had a feeling about what it started with? Maybe it starts with an F or something like that. Okay. So what does all this mean, right? What has this told us about the way language production works? Right, so I told you before that it's like this relay where you have to turn this nonverbal thought into words and then into sounds. So these TOTs have taught us a huge amount about how we do that process, right? What there really are is this case where you get stuck halfway through that process. So we think about this in terms of a two-stage model of language production. Right? So up at the top, you have a conceptual level. So if you can't, there's a dog and a cat and a rat there. These are things you're thinking of them. It's not the words for these are your ideas about these things. From there, we map them onto the word level. We call it a lemma level. So it's a word, but it's not really a full word. It's kind of more like the abstract form of a word where it doesn't have any sounds yet, but it's a pointer to that specific word, and it has the grammatical information associated with it. And from there, you can map that on and map it on to...
Does this look familiar? Conceptualization, formulation, articulation, right? Like we saw yesterday. So what happens with these tip of the tongue states? What happens, what goes wrong? She's going to explain it.
To the correct phonemes for each of those words. So if things are going well, I'm trying to say cat, I would activate that. It would send activation on down to the lemma level. It would send its activation on down to the phonological level, and you would say cat, right? No problems. Right. People don't tend to make, see, there I did it. People don't tend to make very many tip of the tongue states on words like cat. So let's go back to our spelunker one. Okay, so we start up at the conceptual level. I have an idea of a spelunker. I map it onto the lemma level. Ideally, I should be able to map that onto the phonological level as well. The problem with the tip of the tongue state is that something's gone wrong during that last stage. I've made that first step just fine. I have the word, I know it. This is what's driving me crazy. It's those sounds that I'm not able to get out. Or sometimes I might even have some partial information. I know it starts with a S. It's an S word, but I don't have the rest of it. So a little bit of information has gone down, but not enough to get you all of the way there. So one important thing to take away from these TOTs is that so much stuff has actually gone right when you're doing it. They're incredibly frustrating, right? We know that as we get older, they become more and more common, right? And this drives people insane. They think that they're losing it. It's actually not all bad news. One reason that we think that older people have more of these than younger people is that older people just have larger vocabularies to some extent, right? And so when you're in a tip of the, so a younger person, for example, might just be, I don't know, right? Doesn't worry them. I don't know that word, right? If you're older, you have a larger vocabulary, you might actually know this word, and you're in a tip of the tongue state. So it feels much, much worse to be in it because you're almost there. It's much more annoying. But it's actually a situation of a lot more information than if you just plain old don't know the word. Right? So this explains these tip of the tongue errors. How do we explain these
Okay, we're gonna stop this one right here. See, I just said start instead of stop. Do you see how that just happened? We're going to stop this one right here. And I said, we're going to start this one right here. Start and stop are opposites. Start and stop also start with the same two consonant letters. Interesting. You see? You see how this works? Okay. All right, so let's take a look at this short video. It's 4 minutes long. This guy, I'm preparing you guys, this guy speaks extremely fast. So this will be a challenge for your listening skills right now. Okay, you ready? All right, listen to his explanation about why this happens, which is similar to what Dr. Humphreys just explained. And after the video, I'm going to ask you a very important question. Okay?
We all know it, the intense frustration, the deep self-loathing when a word is stuck. It's right on the tip of your tongue. Researchers have been studying this phenomenon since the 1960s, hoping for some relief, and finally, thanks to science, we have salvation. The words presque vu, meaning almost seen, describe that thing where you can almost say a word, you're positive you know it, and if I just give you like half a second, you'd be able to say it, but no, you totally never get it. And the French term provides a nice dose of always appreciated culture, and I use it because the English one doesn't exist. Not because I can't think of it, it's just we don't have a word for it. According to researchers, tip of the tongue states, or TOTS, happen all the time, an infuriating once a week for most of us, which increases to about once daily as we age. They span most languages, from Arabic to Afrikaans, and in the worst cases, they're accompanied by blockers, or so-called ugly sisters. Like when you're trying to think of Van Gogh, and all you can think of is Vin Diesel. To understand tip of the tongue states, scientists combine theories in neuroscience and computer science into what's known as connectionist models. These describe the ways we can use computers to simulate how neurons in our brains handle language. In these models, the brain is represented as a network of connected nodes, processing centers that are kind of like individual computers. Even though the connectionist models describe things in terms of networks and nodes, they're a lot like how our brains actually work. In 1949, a psychologist named Donald Hebb proposed a theory to explain how neurons in the brain change through experience to encode new information. It's how we learn. In both connectionist models and neuroscience, as you have a thought, particular clusters of neurons or nodes are activated, meaning they start sending signals to each other. Activation then spreads from higher, more complex clusters to lower ones in patterns that seem unpredictable at first, but after a while, it's not unpredictable at all. Activating certain clusters when you have a thought actually physically changes the connections between them, making it more likely they'll activate together again. It's like a path in the woods. The more it's used, the more defined the path gets. And while learning is all well and good, it doesn't mean much if you can't cough up all the no good stuff when it comes time to. Retrieving the knowledge starts at the highest level clusters, the one containing semantic or meaning information. Then the activation spreads down to the lowest level clusters containing phonological or sound information. So say you want to talk about King Arthur's sword. First, a higher level cluster would light up, and that would spread down to the clusters for each sound in Excalibur. A tip of the tongue state is what happens when the meaning clusters light up, but the sound clusters don't activate completely because the signal in your brain takes a detour instead of following the right path. That's why you can often describe characteristics of the word and not the whole word itself. It's like it starts with S or it rhymes with Snortzenbagger when you're trying to remember who played the Terminator. Actually, I was playing a game with my mom recently and she was trying to think of Uma Thurman and she said Erna Thulman, which I'm never gonna let her live that down. And as it turns out, having someone tell you the word is probably doing more harm than good. And something the researchers call the resolution effect. Coming to the word yourself makes it more likely that your brain will reinforce the correct pathway from meaning to sound activation. So the next time someone asks you to help them with a word, you might want to look them in the eye and say, no. You're never going to learn that way. But there are other ways to help them. Researchers have found that giving a person in a TOT state a hint about the word, for example, like Arn, if you're going for Arnold Schwarzenegger, helps them establish the right connections in their brain. And then next time, it'll be easier for them to come up with the word or the person's name on their own. Thanks for watching this episode of SciShow, which was brought to you by our patrons on Patreon. If you want to help support this show so we can keep making more of them and making them better so that you will enjoy them and enjoy them more and just watch more and share them with all your friends and seem like a really smart person, go to patreon.com/SciShow. And if you just want to keep watching them,
Okay. Okay. Did you understand any of that? It's pretty intense. Okay, here's my important question. You ready? All right, let's imagine that somebody says, let's say that there's an English student, right? A beginning English student. And the English student says to me, teacher, what is this called? Y'all see my image right here, right? What is this called, teacher? And I say, oh yeah, oh my God, what is that word? Oh my gosh. It starts with a P, it's like, it's, isn't that ridiculous? Doesn't that sound funny? Especially as a native speaker. I say, oh, can you go get me oh my gosh, what is this thing called? What is it called? I can't remember. What is the thing? I think it starts with a P. And you all are smiling at me like, come on, that's never going to happen. And you're right. That's never going to happen. Why?
Because the word is really common.
Exactly. So if you guys paid attention to what the guy said in the video, he said, it's like a path in the woods, right? Have you ever gone hiking on a path? When you go hiking, sometimes there are paths that a lot of people have walked on. So you can clearly see the path, right? Sometimes there are paths that are not very walked on. So the path is not well defined. You can't see it very well. It's the same idea with tip of the tongue. So we have tip of the tongue with words that we don't use as often because the path from our brain to get that word and to produce that word is not as well defined as words that we use every day like pen. Okay, so with things like colors, this is never going to happen. I can look at Amelia, for example, and I could say, oh yeah, that's my son's favorite color. The color that you're wearing is my son's favorite color, which is true. Oh, what is that color called? I can't remember. No, that's not going to happen. It's red. Everybody knows red. It's like you never forget the word red. Yeah, but you can forget the word, for example, spelunker. Or you can forget the word, I don't know, telescope, or you can forget a word that you don't use as often. Okay? Got it? How often did you guys check? Did you catch what the speaker said? How often this happens usually on average?
Once a week.
Once a day.
For people like us. And then as we get to be older, up to once a day.
Once a day, yeah.
As we get older. So I think that's interesting. It's an interesting.
That's bad.
Bad. Yeah, it's bad. But that's part of getting older. I think getting older is just no fun. We know that. Okay.
Teacher, one question. And what happened with this tape of the tongue with bilingual people? We have the kind of this phenomenon when we are talking in English and we forgot, but we remember in Spanish.
Yes. Yes.
Something like that.
Yes, we can have that as well. It has to do with the use, the amount of use you get out of a word. So like normally we're more likely to forget a word if we don't use it as often. Yeah, so that's quite possible. And bilinguals have double the vocabulary, basically. If you have a balanced bilingual, which doesn't really exist, but a balanced bilingual who speaks both of their languages exactly the same, which like I said, doesn't exist. For me, it doesn't exist. But anyway, those people have twice the vocabulary, and so just like the guy explained in the video, he said, when we get older, this happens to us more. Sometimes it's because we have more vocabulary, you see? So it's not necessarily because of anything else, we just have a larger vocabulary. And so it's easy. We have more words that we can actually have at the tip of our tongue. Because as you saw in Dr. Humphrey's talk, we can retrieve the word. We have the lemma. We have the abstract form. It's in our heads. But something happens when we try to convert that into its phonological representation that we just can't do it. There's something blocking it. We don't know what. We don't know. But this can happen again more often when you're tired as well. You guys might have that experience, right? When you're tired, you can't retrieve words as well. Kind of like now. Okay. Let's continue for a little bit, guys, then, okay? All right, so that was tip of the tongue. Now you understand a little bit better what happens there, why it happens, what's going on in our head. Okay. and why it's so frustrating. All right. So we were talking about morphemes, right? Remember, morphemes are small parts of words. And in this chapter, they talk about something called a WUG test. Has anyone ever heard of a WUG test? You have a new creature in your mind now that you've never had there before. And it's this creature right here. This is a WUG, okay? It looks like a profile of a bird or something, right? But it's a WUG. That's what we call it. We call it a WUG. This is something that we linguists are very familiar with. Whenever someone says we did a WUG test, we know exactly what a WUG is, okay? Now you do too. Okay, what is the purpose of a WUG test? What we want to see is how our brain naturally produces, in this case, plurals. But a WUG test is used for plurals and for past tenses in English, okay? So what happens? We show a person like this, something like this picture right here, right? And we say, okay, this is a WUG, yeah? And then we say to them, this is oral, we give this to them orally. You guys are reading it, but we give this orally normally. We say, this is a WUG. And then we say, now there are two of them. Now there's another one, there are two of them. There are two
WUGs.
WUGs.
WUGs, right? WUGs. Yes. I promise you that every native speaker of English will answer the exact same thing. WUGs. British, from New Zealand, from Australia, from South Africa, from the United States, from Canada, from wherever, every single native speaker of English will tell you WUGs without knowing the rule of plurals in English, without knowing the explicit rule of plurals. They will all say WUGs. No native speaker will say WUGs or will say WUX, because it's not like that, it's WUGs, z, right? That sound. Every native speaker will say the same thing, okay? Then they give another picture. They say, okay, this is a gutch. Now there's another one. There are two of them. There are two gutches. And every single native speaker of English will tell you gutches without thinking, okay, it ends in TCH, so that means that it needs to have an ES plural. They don't think all that. They just say gutches. They don't know the word gutch, but they know how their language works, right? This is a tour. The last picture. Now there's another one. There are two of them. There are two tours. Every native speaker of English will tell you tours. Yeah. What is this testing? This is testing what we have implicitly in our brains about how plurals are formed in English. We don't ask them the explicit rules, but they have enough data in their brains to be able to tell you what the plural is of words that they have never seen before. Okay, now we're going to do the same in Spanish. I want to see what happens. Okay, we're going to do the same in Spanish. We're going to give them different names in Spanish. I just need to make sure that these words don't actually exist in Spanish. Londa. Okay. This one right here. The word, does this word exist in Spanish? I'm going to write it in the chat, okay? Does this word exist in Spanish?
Londa, maybe.
Londa.
No.
No, that's exactly what I want. I want a word that doesn't exist. So we're good. Okay. Entonces, imaginémonos, ya, vamos a hacer esto en español. Díganme nomás, no escriban, sino que díganlo. Esto es una londa, ¿ya? Ahora hay dos. ¿Hay dos?
Londas.
Londas. Everybody says londas, right? You didn't have to think about any rules of pluralization in your language. You just say londa, una londa, dos londas. Yeah, fine, no problem. Correct? Okay. Let's name the second one. Let's see if this word exists in Spanish. I doubt it. The spell checker is like, nope, you can't say that.
No.
Frondices.
Frondiz. Frondiz.
Frondiz.
No. Okay.
Frondices.
No.
A ver, esperen un momentito. Este es un frondiz. Ahora hay dos. Hay dos.
Frondices.
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 Okay.
Con C.
Por eso
Okay.
le aumentamos la S.
Yeah, ready for the hard one? Let's see if this one exists. Does this word exist in Spanish? Plosis?
No.
Okay, good. Lo último, este de aquí, el último. Este es una, it doesn't matter, un plosis, ¿ya? Ahora hay dos. Hay dos.
Plosices.
Plossis. Gotta be plossis.
Those of you who are saying plosices are the same people who, when you say, instead of papas, you say papaces. Oh, wow.
Exactly.
Plosis is like tesis. Una tesis, dos. Tesis. Un análisis, dos. Análisis.
Lunes.
Plosis, dos.
Lunes, martes.
No. Yeah, but it doesn't end in SIS. The thing is that when it ends in SIS in Spanish, then the singular and the plural are the same. So technically, it would be dos plosis, not dos plosises, because you don't say dos tesises or dos análisis.
Como que.
Okay. Anyways, you guys no se ponen de acuerdo, but that's okay. Yeah, the idea is to test productivity. In other words, how do we naturally form new plurals with new words that we never saw before? How do we naturally form them? And normally, we find that native speakers all respond the same way. They all give the same answer. Okay? That's a WUG test. It's to test morphemes, productivity. Yeah? Okay, let me stop this for a moment. Hold on one second. Any questions on the WUG test before we continue? Let me just pull up chapter 4 in the text. Take a look if we've covered the things that I wanted to cover today. Okay. Yeah. All right, to finish today, we're going to take one look at this table right here. I'm in chapter 4 in your books on page 63. Yeah. Oh, this looks kind of familiar, doesn't it? Doesn't this look familiar, like déjà vu?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the difference here, though? Remember before?
Sounds.
Sounders. You guys are bien pilas. I can't pull anything past you. Okay, good. Sound errors, right? So in chapter 4, we're talking about building words. So when we build words, we can have sound errors. So if you notice, the names of the sound errors are the same as the names of the word errors, with the exception of the fact that we don't have what?
Blend.
Exactly. We don't blend because normally we don't blend two sounds together. Normally we don't do that. We blend two words, but not two sounds, okay? So we have the exact same situation here. Substitution, anticipation, perseveration, exchange, omission, addition, right? In his inimitable style, in his inimical style. So the error is the C sound, and that was a substitution. We substituted the T for this sound. Just one sound we're talking about now, right? Fat and placid, and the person accidentally said flat and placid. Where did this L come from? Here. Anticipation. It was said too early. Okay. God rest instead of ye, merry gentlemen. This is the name of a Christmas song, if any of you know. Where did this come from? This sound was repeated again here. Rest instead of the Y sound. Yeah. Exchange like a lilting willy instead of like a wilting lily. Yeah, so we have an exchange of just two sounds in this case, the first sound of each word, right? Omission, most models have acquired dyslexies, but they were supposed to say dyslexia.
Dyslexia.
So they omitted this sound right here. Yeah. And then the last one, addition, instead of saying optimal number, the person accidentally said optimal number. So they added this sound right here. That doesn't go here. Okay. So it's the exact same idea, only now we're looking at specific sounds. Now we're just looking at sounds, not whole words. Okay. So with that, guess what you're going to do? In the last 10 minutes, right, in the last 10 minutes, you guys are going to go through this exercise here at the end of chapter 4, which does the same thing, identifying the errors right here. Yeah, so look at exercise 4.1. It shouldn't take you longer than 5 minutes. Really, there's 5 questions, 5 minutes. Identify the errors, right? And then tell which kind they are, which kind of error they are. And then we'll go over those together as a class and we'll be finished for today, okay? So let me split you into breakout rooms. I'm going to reassign them so you guys can work with different people this time. And I'll bring you back to class in about 7 or 8 minutes, okay? So go ahead. Okay, let's go through this. See how you guys did.
All right.
Okay, for the first one, what do you, I just missed my lift and the person accidentally says, I just missed my list. What is that? Go ahead and put it in the chat. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Do you have another guess?
So is that substitution?
That's what everybody What?
What do you mean with uh-oh?
You want to try again?
Exchange? You're saying that is exchange?
Anticipation.
Perseveration.
But how can you confirm that that is actually perseveration? Because you have the others as well, right?
You have the others what?
Like, for example, so
The word mine.
Okay, here's the thing though. You have to look at the rest of the context, right? You have to look at the rest of the context of the utterance. See if this sound appears anywhere else. So the person says, I've just missed my list. You see? So the most logical answer to this would be that it's perseveration because that missed is mass. It's pronounced missed, like M-I-S-T, right?
It's about pronunciation.
Yeah. Perseveration is the best answer here. Okay, what about this one? I beat the shit out of him. I bit the sheet out of him. What do we notice here? What is this kind of error? I think this one is a little bit easier. There we go. Now we're back on track. Yeah. Yes, this is an exchange. An exchange in this case of the vowel sounds, right? I and E. So this is exchange. Yeah. It's a real mystery. It's a meal mystery. What is this? Yeah, we do. Good. Good. See, that was just, you were just testing me on the first one, you know, making sure that I was paying attention, right? Yep. Okay. Yeah, okay. So yes, this is anticipation because we say the M sound too early, right? Yeah. The wicked step sisters. I could see an argument for two different answers here, so I would accept either one. Okay, I could accept addition. Yes, which is what a lot of you are putting. And also some of you are putting perseveration, and I think that's also fine. So in this case, I could accept an argument for either addition, because you added a T sound, or perseveration, because you have step, and then you repeat the same sisters. Yeah.
Teacher, why is not anticipation from tears?
Because we're focusing here on the ST blend, this sound here.
All right.
Yeah. I doubt that it comes from here. It doesn't seem very logical. It seems like the initial sound is repeated again here. Yeah. Okay. And number 5, the zipper is narrow and the person says the nipper is 0. Yeah. Good. Okay. If you got any wrong, do you at least understand why you got them wrong? That's the most important thing.
Because I think we're
teacher. Oh.
I'm sorry, yeah. Because I think we're focusing on the original sentence and the second sentence instead of just listening the second one in our heads.
Okay. Okay.
The last one can be anticipation.
But then you don't have anything to account for 0.
Okay.
Right? Because you have two sounds that switch places with each other. So I think the most logical answer is exchange.
Yeah, I have exchange, but I think as well it can be anticipation. But as you mentioned, we need something to compare, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Teacher, I have a question. When we talk about perseveration or yes, perseveration, we can tend to change the letter from the I mean, if I have a letter at the beginning of the sentence, I can perceive this sound to the end, it works or not?
Can you ask it again? I didn't quite understand.
Yes, because my question is how many words could be in the middle of the sound I perceive to the other, or there is no?
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter?
No.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. That's why we have to always look at the whole context, right? Okay.
I find, well, like more like a comment. I find this quite more challenging for those of us who are not native speakers because, like, there might be more subtle differences. Might not be too easy to recognize.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe just that. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, my only advice is to look at the whole context of the utterance and see, okay, the first thing you would say, oh, substitution, but check the rest of the context, see if there's anywhere else that might come from. Like this M, okay, it was R, oh, M, okay, substitution. Oh, but wait, there's an M that starts the next word, right? So you have to take into consideration the whole context, okay? Any other questions on this? Okay. Any questions in general?
No.
No, I just want to get out of the class. I want to be done.
No,
No,
it's
guys,
clear.
everybody's super tired by this time. We're super tired. I get it. I get it. No other questions? Okay, so tomorrow, we're going to start the class with tongue twisters. We're going to see what happens with tongue twisters. Why are tongue twisters hard for us? What happens in our brain when we try to do tongue twisters? Why are they complicated? We're going to see what is supposedly the most difficult tongue twister in the English language. We're going to see what that is. It's a very short one. It's only 6 words. Yeah. And I want you guys to start thinking at the very least about what might be some tongue twisters that you can work with in Spanish, okay? Start thinking. This is not homework. We can do it tomorrow in class together, okay? But start thinking of some tongue twisters. For the experiment that you're going to do in tongue twisters, you're going to need 3 of them. You're going to need a tongue twister that is pretty easy in Spanish. You're going to need one that's medium difficulty, and you're going to need a very difficult one, all in Spanish, because you're going to do this with native speakers of Spanish. Okay? So you can start thinking about those tongue twisters if you know some. Now, tongue twisters do not mean all these words that you don't recognize in the tongue twister, because a lot of Spanish tongue twisters like to invent new words. That's not what a tongue twister really is testing. It's the alternation of sounds. Okay, so when you guys are thinking of some tongue twisters, try to find some that have a good alternation of sounds, like the one that's tres tristes tigres, right? Because you have the tre and you also have the t sound that are alternating. So something like that, right? Keep that in mind when you're thinking of tongue twisters, because tomorrow we're going to put together a list of 3 of them, and you all are going to do the experiment to some people in the next week, okay? So that's what we have to look for.
Okay. Jenny, I have a question.
Yes.
Do we have the Zoom class in the platform?
Yes.
Okay.
It's right on the general, and the first page, right when you open my class, The first page, it says general and it has
Right.
the name of the class. Right underneath there is where you have all the texts and also the Zoom link.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Okay, good night, guys. See you tomorrow.
Bye, see you tomorrow.
Thank you, teacher.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.
Bye, Paul.
Bye.
Bye.